Wild.
That was 1991. It took me a number of years to integrate that experience. I mean, it was actually, it rocked me to the core.
Yeah.
Because, here was the establishment, in my opinion, sort of creating a version of a reality that bore no resemblance to what had actually occurred. And of course, as I went through the process of trying to understand the reasons why, and ultimately, of course, did, and the reasons are very clear. It was all about, one, obviously taking control of the Iraqi oil output, which they achieved by sanctions until such time as the invasion of 2003.
Yeah.
But it was also to effectively get the Emir of Kuwait to pump a significant chunk of his money into the American economy by paying the oil companies $7 billion to put out the fires. So it's a classic case of, create the problem, you get the reaction, you offer the solution.
Exactly. They always fall.
Beautiful. So it took me another 7 years, really, before I came out of the oil industry. I finally left the oil industry in 1998, started my research, which has basically led to me re-educating myself in terms of everything I thought I knew. I did get suckered back into the corporate world for about 18 months in 1999. But then finally in October 2000, I knew that I had no desire to spend the rest of my life ostensibly in economic slavery or as a corporate whore. And so I left and was actually in Central America doing some research into Mayan mythology, Mayan cosmology.
Right.
In 2001. And that's where I was when 9/11 occurred.
Right.
And from that moment forward, as it were, the rest is history.
What triggered you to go into the Mayan research?
Well, I think that, it was in 1998 when I was starting to sort of revisit everything I thought I knew. I mean, I came across so many different areas and, was fascinated by all of them. And of course, you can't do everything at once. And so, it was a question of which area was I most interested to pursue.
Yeah.
And I had spent a lot of time in Egypt during my my time in the oil field because I was based in Dubai and I had responsibility for everything between Egypt and Iran. And so I had many trips to Egypt and had become fascinated by Egyptian mythology, which I had done quite a bit of research in. And then I was fascinated by the similarities in the mythology between Egypt and Central America, ostensibly the Mayans.
Yeah.
And of course, absolutely fascinated by the similarity of the construction techniques as well.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I actually came to a conclusion that there's far more of a linkage between ancient Egypt and the Mayan civilization than orthodox archaeology will admit to.
Yeah, true. I mean, once you see that true history has clearly been suppressed and altered, and the evidence that you can see firsthand, especially if you travel to these places yourself as well, the evidence you can see firsthand contradicts what was sort of brought up on in school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and of course, this is what has occurred is as there has been, how shall I say, maybe due to the internet, but maybe other reasons as well. But whilst there has been an increase in natural, intellectual, and spiritual curiosity,
yeah,
there's been a counter effort by the establishment to effectively dumb down the whole process of education so that we no longer educate our children to be curious.
That's it.
We actually beat intellectual curiosity out of our kids and basically give them a story and tell them that's the way it is, and God forbid that they ever question that story. And of course what we have to do is we actually have to counter that, and we have to find ways to encourage people to be intellectually curious and effectively question everything.
Exactly, and it tends to be an artistic angle, doesn't it? The suppression of the right brain and the focus on the more practical and solid sides of learning rather than the...
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the whole of the, for want of a better term, the New World Order construct is built around a rationale and science-based thought process. So in other words, yeah, you're absolutely right. Shut down the right brain completely and keep everything on the left brain, because the left brain is far easier to control.
It's completely materialistic.
Totally. And of course, I mean, we have the classic of Zbigniew Brzezinski, just a few weeks ago, when he was speaking to the Council on Foreign Relations, in mid-May, and he made the observation, he said that, one of the threats to the establishment of a one world government is the rapid political awakening of the masses. Yeah. Now, what's interesting as well is 40 years ago, when he wrote a book called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era.
Beautiful.
He made an observation there, and he said that one of the challenges for Western governments in the coming years is going to be to keep people locked into consumerist materialism, preventing them from realizing who they truly are.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So they spelled it all out, though. They need to bombard us.
Exactly.
The right frequencies, the right words, the right tone. They need to keep us dumbed down, and they need to keep us blind. But they know more than we do about the awakening. They're more aware of what's going to happen than even we are. So, but yeah, Brzezinski's definitely, if you've got a New World Order top Trump set, he's definitely one of the top 10, that one.
Oh, without any shadow of doubt. And you're absolutely right that these guys, have known, it is why they call themselves the Illuminati, the illuminated ones. But actually, of course, they're illuminated in darkness. And what scares the crap out of them is this realization that humanity is going through a natural awakening process.
Yeah.
And this is why, they are doing everything within their power to try and stop or at least stem the process.
Yeah.
And you guys have already touched on, the control of food and Codex Alimentarius and its vaccinations and fluoride in the water. I mean, all of these, and the pharmaceuticals, of course, all of these, this multi-pronged attack on humanity is all about trying to shut down the natural evolutionary process, which is effectively giving humanity an opportunity to return to where it was, maybe even as recently as a couple of thousand years ago, but certainly, certainly 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. And, we're going through this cycle, at least a 5,125 year cycle, and quite possibly even a 26,000 year cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
And these guys, unfortunately for them, aren't able to participate in this process because they are locked in to where they're at. And in fact, I actually released a DVD of a presentation I gave 4 years ago now, called The Hidden Agenda, where I talked at great length about the belief system of the inner sanctum of those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers.
Yeah.
And why it is that they're running scared of 2012. I also explain, that they have known about the significance of the year 2012 for a lot longer than it's been in the mass consciousness. I mean, we can actually trace the moment that 2012 really entered into the mass consciousness as the moment that Jose Arguelles published the Mayan Factor.
Right. I've heard this mentioned before, yeah. When people were trying to figure out, look, is this just another year 2000 thing, or, where does it come from? Who started this? Did someone write a book? I remember that one being mentioned, but I haven't looked at it myself personally. But I often play devil's advocate with this one when people talk about the Illuminati and any other fraternal order, which is either evidenced or suspected to be controlling certain companies, events, or whatever. I think what triggered this was, you probably read it yourself, Ian, and I think I might have mentioned this to Anthony in the past, but there was a forum post especially, brings it up, a forum post by a user called Hidden Hand, and they came on and said, look, guys, we've got to, it's part of the rules. We've got to tell you what we're doing. We've got to communicate with the public. We've got to let you know why we're doing it.
Exactly.
And they said, well, one of the main reasons we do all of this bad is because it has an opposite reaction. It creates the good. So we dumb you down, and then we actually encourage some of you to awaken even more by dumbing some of you down. We kill lots of people because it helps you wake up to who you really are and all this type of stuff. So, I mean, if someone was to say what I've just said and was to claim, for example, not that I'm obviously not claiming this myself, but if someone were to claim from an inside angle that people such as, if you want to call them Illuminati or, whatever name you choose, what would you say if someone said, well, there's evidence that they're doing all this bad because it's bringing about all of the good?
Well, interestingly enough, I've made similar observations myself, in a slightly different way. But, let's acknowledge that when we go through life, we have a number of opportunities in our lives to accelerate our learning.
Yeah.
And the reality is that our learning is accelerated at the most significant rate of knots when we go through deep trauma. And the deeper the trauma, the greater the opportunity for learning.
That's it.
And hopefully for most people, their life isn't one continuous trauma. I'd hate to think what the karma must be for somebody who has to go through that or endure that. So what tends to happen, there are people who go through life, and it's all relatively plain sailing. And, maybe for those people, maybe they're either very young souls who are just experiencing physicality for, the first time, or they're very advanced souls who are just, holding the balance. But, for the vast majority of people, we have the opportunity to learn, and the learning kicks in just as we think we're, hey, look, we're in great position here, we're sitting comfortably, the job's going good, everything's good at home, no problem. I can actually sit back, maybe take a vacation, and then bam, something happens. The rug's pulled out from under you. Maybe you lose your job, or somebody in the close family's diagnosed with terminal illness. It can be any one of a multitude of different things. But each one of these traumas, these dramas, creates an opportunity for learning. And of course, the reality is, if we don't learn from them, we are destined to repeat the process and go through it again and maybe again and again until we do learn. And so that's on the microcosm. That's on the micro basis. And we can apply exactly the same principle and philosophy to the macrocosm. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, your observation is actually quite sound. And that, the greater and more outrageous the activities of those who look as though they're trying to establish the one world government, there is no question the greater the opportunity there is for more people to awaken and realize that they have had their personal sovereignty stripped from them,
exactly,
stripped bare, and actually start the process of regaining that personal sovereignty.